In October 2021, Ali Abulaban, a rising TikTok star known as Jin Kid, shocked the world when he brutally murdered his estranged wife, Anna Abulaban, and her friend, Rayburn in a San Diego luxury apartment. Their death sent waves of sorrow through their families and the community. Now, sentenced to life in prison, this chilling case serves as a dark reminder of how jealousy, unchecked rage, and the hidden complexities of personal relationships can tragically culminate in violence. In October 2021, San Diego was stunned by a tragic double murder committed by social media personality Ali Abulaban. Known as Jin Kid on TikTok, Ali had built a reputation for his comedic videos and Scarface impersonations, but his private life was crumbling. His estranged wife, Anna Abulaban, had recently moved out after enduring a toxic relationship. Ali, suspicious of Anna's activities, placed a listening device in her apartment. Upon hearing another man's voice, his jealousy turned deadly. That fateful day, Ali used a key card to gain entry to the apartment in the East Village high-rise where Anna was living. Inside, he discovered Anna with her friend, Rayburn Baron. Ali, fueled by rage, shot and killed them both in cold blood. He then fled the scene, later calling his mother and confessing to the crime. Authorities quickly apprehended him, and the high-profile case became a shocking example of domestic violence gone to the extreme. Neighbors were horrified as news spread that the quiet, seemingly composed Ali had committed such a heinous act. His decision to kill both his estranged wife and her friend was rooted in a combination of jealousy, possessiveness, and loss of control. Anna had made the difficult decision to leave him, but Ali's inability to let go led to this deadly outcome. The murders were not only a tragedy for Anna and Rayburn's families, but also a chilling reflection of the darker side of domestic relationships. Following his arrest, the media extensively covered the case, painting Ali as a man who lived two lives, one as a TikTok star with thousands of followers and another as a controlling, abusive husband. His fame could not shield him from the consequences of his actions. Anna's family was devastated by the loss of a daughter and mother, while Rayburn's loved ones were left grappling with the senseless loss of a kind and compassionate man. Ali's erratic behavior leading up to the crime only added to the horror. He had a history of controlling Anna and even monitored her every move in the weeks before the killings. Despite the growing tension, no one expected the situation to escalate into such a horrific act. As the investigation unfolded, more details about their volatile relationship emerged, painting a picture of a man whose jealousy and possessiveness ultimately led to murder. The couple's young daughter, Amira, was left behind, now growing up without both parents, one lost to violence, the other to a lifetime behind bars. For many, the crime raised questions about how domestic abuse can escalate into lethal violence, and it left a lasting impact on the San Diego community. The seemingly glamorous life of a TikTok star quickly unraveled into a nightmare no one could have anticipated. Ali Abulaban's trial became a focal point for the media, drawing attention from around the country. His defense centered on claims that he was under the influence of drugs, specifically in a state of drug-induced psychosis at the time of the murders. However, the prosecution argued that this was a clear case of premeditated murder, not a crime of passion or momentary lapse in judgment. They painted a picture of a jealous, possessive man who could not handle his wife's independence. During the trial, it was revealed that Ali had bugged Anna's apartment, using a listening device to spy on her after she left him. He had installed the device in the living room, hoping to catch her with another man. On the day of the murders, he listened to the recording and, enraged by what he heard, drove to the apartment with a gun. The prosecution argued that this act showed clear premeditation, as he entered the apartment armed and ready to kill. Anna's family and friends took the stand to share the heartbreaking reality of her relationship with Ali. They described him as controlling and possessive, revealing that Anna had confided in them about her fear of Ollie. Rayburn's family also testified, describing him as a kind, caring man who had done nothing to provoke such violence. Their testimonies underscored the senselessness of the killings and the deep pain caused by the loss of 2 innocent lives. The defense tried to paint a different picture, arguing that Ollie had a troubled past and was not in control of his actions during the murders. They claimed that his mental health had deteriorated in the weeks leading up to the crime and that he had been abusing cocaine, which further impaired his judgment. His lawyer also highlighted the trauma Ollie had experienced throughout his life, attempting to gain sympathy from the jury. However, the prosecution was steadfast in its argument that this was a calculated, cold-blooded act. They pointed out that Ollie had ample time to reconsider his actions as he drove to the apartment and even during the elevator ride up to Anna's floor. The fact that he brought a gun with him and shot both Anna and Rayburn without hesitation demonstrated a clear intent to kill, they argued. The jury listened carefully to both sides but ultimately sided with the prosecution. After weeks of emotional testimonies and detailed evidence, including the chilling recordings from the apartment, they found Ollie guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder. The special circumstance allegations of committing multiple murders were also found to be true, ensuring that Ollie would face the maximum possible sentence. At this stage in the documentary, the trial of Ollie Abulaban has revealed harrowing details about his actions and his defense's argument. The prosecution successfully established that Ollie's crime was premeditated, fueled by jealousy and possessiveness, rather than a heat of passion crime. The families of Anna and Rayburn expressed their deep sorrow, and Ollie's outburst in court showed his lack of true remorse. The legal strategies and emotional testimonies from both sides kept the courtroom tense. The jury moved toward a decisive verdict. The sentencing phase of Ollie Abulaban's trial brought more emotional moments, as both families shared their victim impact statements. Anna's sister tearfully spoke about the devastating loss her family had endured, expressing anger and grief over the years of abuse Anna had suffered. She described Anna as a loving sister and mother who had been trapped in a toxic relationship with Ollie, unable to escape until it was too late. Rayburn's family also delivered heartbreaking statements, describing him as a generous and compassionate man whose life was cut tragically short. They spoke of the void his death had left in their lives, struggling to come to terms with the senseless violence that had taken him away. For both families, the pain was palpable, and the courtroom was filled with emotion as they addressed the man responsible for their loss. When it was Ollie's turn to speak, he offered an apology, but continued to defend his actions, claiming he was not in control of himself at the time. He reiterated his claim that he was in a drug-induced psychosis and begged the judge for leniency, asking for a chance at rehabilitation. However, his words did little to sway the judge or the victims' families, who were left unconvinced of his remorse. Judge Jeffrey Fraser had harsh words for Ollie as he handed down the sentence. He expressed doubt that Ollie felt any genuine remorse for his actions, describing him as selfish and cold-blooded. Fraser compared Ollie's behavior to the persona he portrayed in his Scarface videos, calling him a talented actor who had shown no real emotion for anyone but himself throughout the trial. The judge then delivered the final blow. Ollie would serve 2 consecutive 25-year to life sentences for the murders of Anna and Rayburn. He would spend the rest of his life in prison with no possibility of parole. Judge Fraser made it clear that Ollie would die behind bars, never again to be a free man. It was a fitting punishment for a crime so brutal and senseless, and one that brought some closure to the victims' families. As Ollie was led out of the courtroom, Anna and Rayburn's families were left to pick up the pieces of their shattered lives. While no sentence could bring their loved ones back, the knowledge that Ollie would never hurt anyone again offered some solace. The sentencing marked the end of a long, painful journey for the families, but the scars left by Ollie's actions would remain forever. The tragic case of Ali Abilaban sheds light on the devastating consequences of unchecked jealousy and domestic violence. Ana's attempt to break free from her toxic relationship ended tragically, highlighting the dangers of possessive behavior. This case illustrates the challenges victims face in escaping abusive situations, even with family support. Rayburn's death, an innocent bystander caught in Ali's rage, shows how collateral damage can occur in such violence. His family mourns the senseless loss, adding another layer of heartbreak to an already devastating situation. The trial also raised questions about the contrast between public persona and private life. Ali, known online for his comedic TikTok videos, lived a darker, more controlling reality offline. His fame and humor masked an abusive nature that no one saw coming, except for those close to Ana. It serves as a reminder that social media can distort perceptions of someone's true character. The community was deeply impacted by the crime. The luxury apartment building, once a place of status, became a grim reminder of the events that unfolded there. Neighbors were left in disbelief as they processed the reality of what happened in their midst. Ali's fame could not shield him from the consequences of his actions, and his story became a cautionary tale of the dangers of hidden violence. Ana's family has since channeled their grief into advocacy, raising awareness about domestic violence and urging others to recognize the warning signs early. Their hope is that Ana's story can help save others from a similar fate. They remind others of the importance of offering support to those in abusive relationships, encouraging them to seek help and escape before it's too late. Rayburn's family continues to honor his memory, reflecting on the kindness and generosity he displayed throughout his life. His sudden and violent death left a void that can never be filled, but his loved ones carry on, determined to remember him for the good he brought to the world. The San Diego community has also had to confront the harsh reality of domestic violence in their midst. The case sparked conversations about the need for better resources for victims and highlighted the importance of breaking the cycle of abuse before it escalates into violence. Awareness of the signs of abuse became more prominent in the months following the trial. While justice was served in the form of Ali's life sentence, the scars of the crime will remain with both families forever. The trial's conclusion brought some closure, but the emotional toll left behind will take much longer to heal. Ana and Rayburn's families now move forward, forever marked by the tragic events that claimed their loved ones. Ali's actions not only destroyed lives, but also brought attention to the darker side of relationships that can sometimes go unnoticed. His case stands as a sobering reminder that domestic violence can affect anyone, even those who seem to have it all.
Have you ever noticed how that true crime stories that really stay with us are the ones that feel a little too real, you know?
Yeah, like they're showing us something unsettling about ourselves, something we usually don't want to think about.
Exactly. And today's deep dive, it's definitely one of those cases. We're talking about social media, a relationship gone very wrong, and a double homicide that had everyone asking, how could this happen? So we're diving into this NBC7 San Diego article all about Ali Abilaban, you might know him as Jin Kid from TikTok, and fair warning, this one's heavy. We're talking about the deaths of his estranged wife, Ana, and her friend, Rayburn Barron. But if you're ready to go beyond the headlines with us, buckle up.
Yeah, let's get into it.
This article lays out a really clear timeline, and it's obvious that Ali and Ana's marriage was already falling apart, right? She was ready to move on. And get this, Ali had secretly put a listening device on their daughter's tablet.
Whoa, talk about a major violation of trust.
Right.
And it's not just about him tracking her. This is him listening to her private conversations, probably hoping to catch her doing something wrong. We see this a lot in these kinds of cases, unfortunately. Technology becomes a weapon in a toxic relationship.
And that's exactly when things took such a dark turn. Ali's listening in, and he hears Ana with Rayburn at their apartment. Now look, we've all felt jealous, but Ali's reaction was extreme. He went straight over there and shot them both.
Just awful.
I know, it's chilling. And here's where the legal arguments get interesting. The prosecution was all about premeditation.
Right. They were saying this wasn't some crime of passion, something that happened in the heat of the moment. This was planned.
Like he went in with a plan.
Exactly. And they brought out all this evidence,
Right.
graphic photos from the crime scene, his internet search history, basically painting this picture of someone who had thought this through step by step. There was no way they were letting Abu Laban claim he just snapped.
So the defense had to come up with a different angle, and they went with the classic crime of passion argument.
Right, a classic.
They were pointing to Ali's mental state at the time, the fact that he admitted to using cocaine, and the intense emotions of that moment to argue that he just wasn't in control of himself.
And this is where the law gets really tricky, you see. Imagine someone walks in on their spouse cheating and just loses it completely. A fight breaks out, and it ends tragically. That's often how crime of passion is used in court.
Right.
It's still a crime, obviously. But the argument is that it was driven by this really specific, explosive emotional state, not some cold, calculated plan.
So the jury had to decide. Was Ali Abu Laban a cold-blooded killer or a devastated husband who did something terrible in a moment of madness?
Yeah, and that's the key question, isn't it?
It really is.
I mean, was he truly malicious or just completely lost it?
And the prosecution made a big deal about him having time to cool down, right? They kept bringing up the drive over to the apartment, even those few seconds in the elevator before it happened.
Oh, I bet.
Like all those chances to reconsider, to walk away.
Yeah, classic strategy there. They're trying to convince the jury that Ali was totally in control the whole time, that this was a choice, not just a spur-of-the-moment thing.
And in the end,
the jury believed them.
guilty.
Guilty on both counts of first-degree murder.
Wow. Can you imagine being in that courtroom?
Oh, I can only imagine the emotions, especially for the families. Maybe some relief, finally. But also this overwhelming sadness,
Absolutely. And the article talked about how during the sentencing, Anna's sister gave this incredibly powerful victim impact statement. They said she was like completely distraught, even yelling at one point about wishing she could have saved her sister.
It's a good reminder that these aren't just stories we're talking about. These are real people with real families whose lives are completely shattered.
And it wasn't just Anna either. Think about Rayburn's family.
Oh, gosh. Yeah. I mean, their son, their brother, their friend, just caught in the middle of all this.
It's heartbreaking, just awful. The injustice of it.
Really makes you think about the ripple effect these kinds of things have,
Yeah.
Two families devastated, a daughter who's lost both parents. It's just
Awful.
There's another layer to this whole thing that I think is super relevant today, though, and that's the social media aspect. I mean, Abu Laban wasn't just some random guy on TikTok, right? He had this whole persona, this audience as Jinn Kid, and that ended up being a big part of the trial.
It's interesting, right? Because it makes you wonder how separate someone's online persona is from who they really are.
Totally. And the judge in this case, actually, he even brought it up during sentencing. Remember how Abu Laban used to put those videos imitating Scarface?
The judge basically said that he thought Abu Laban had become that persona when he committed the murders.
Wow. So the judge is basically saying that all that remorse Abu Laban was talking about, maybe it wasn't so sincere after all, especially with those videos where he's playing this hardcore gangster. Makes you think twice about what's real and what's just for show online, doesn't it?
Right. It's like, where do you draw the line? And for someone like Abu Laban, with all his followers, that question of what's authentic, what's performance, it gets even more complicated.
Definitely. And don't forget, all of this is happening while his lawyers are arguing that he was in a state of drug-induced psychosis. So you've got this guy begging for mercy, but then you've got this brutal crime and this larger-than-life online persona. It's a lot.
It's like the judge had to figure out which version of Ali Abu Laban was the real one. The heartbroken husband, the Scarface wannabe, the guy claiming he was high out of his mind.
Right, like how do you even begin to sort through all that? And I think it speaks to this bigger challenge we have now, figuring out human behavior in the age of social media.
It really does.
How much weight do we give to someone's online life versus their offline actions? It's a question we're all trying to figure out.
It's a question for all of us.
Yeah.
And it's not going away anytime soon. It's crazy, right? I mean, how do you even begin to sort through all that?
Right. It's a mess. And in the end, the judge had to make a decision.
And it wasn't a light sentence, was it?
No, definitely not. He gave Abu Laban 25 to life for each murder.
Wow.
And they're running consecutively, so
Yeah.
yeah, he's likely going to be in prison for the rest of his life.
I mean, Can any sentence really make up for what happened, for Anna and Rayburn's families?
Right. What does justice even look like in a case like this? 2 lives are gone. Their families are dealing with this huge gaping hole.
And it's not just about the time, is it? It's the loss, the could-haves, the should-haves, everything those families had to give up because of what happened.
It's devastating. And I think it's important to remember that this conversation isn't over just because the trial is, we need to keep talking about responsibility, about technology, about the consequences of what we do online and in person.
Totally. Because this wasn't just about Ali Abulabran, right? This whole thing should make all of us think twice. It forces us to confront some difficult truths about how we use technology and how it can be used against us.
Absolutely. Think about it. Abulabran using that listening device, that was clearly about control. But how often do we cross lines with privacy these days? Maybe not to that extreme, but still, it makes you think.
Where do we draw the line between being connected and respecting boundaries?
Exactly. It's a tough one.
So much to unpack, even now. But I think if we're taking anything away from this case, from Ali Abulabran's story, it's that behind every headline, every crazy true crime story we hear, there are real people making real choices. And those choices, they have very real consequences.
And as easy as it is to think of these cases as isolated things, something that happens to other people, the truth is they often reflect bigger societal issues, our anxieties, our ethical struggles, stuff we're all dealing with.
So as we wrap up today, let's keep that in mind. Let's question things, examine how technology plays into our lives, and try to understand this complicated world we're living in, both online and offline.
As the documentary closes, Ali Abulabran has been sentenced to consecutive life terms for the murders of his estranged wife, Anna, and her friend, Rayburn Barron. Despite his claims of drug-induced psychosis and attempts to paint the crime as unintentional, the jury found him guilty of first-degree murder. Both families continue to grieve the loss of their loved ones. The case left a lasting impact on San Diego, serving as a reminder of the devastating consequences of domestic violence.